So I'm Reverend Amie V, and this is not my preferred method of communication. So this is a whole new thing for me. But because a lot of you don't go to church and have asked for me to have some talks online, I'm trying this out just for you. So, one thing that you will learn from these talks for me is that I'm going to talk about two of the least popular topics to talk about: religion and politics. And why am I going to talk about those? Because it's about our spirituality, it's about our existence, how we live together, it's about how we go through this world building relationships or destroying relationships. And the church is supposed to be the place where we learn how to deal with the world in an ethical way, in a moral way, and in a loving way. And the thing that I'm most frustrated about the church right now is that not individual churches necessarily, there's plenty of those that are getting it right, but that as a Christian nation, right, we're supposed to be the United States of America, the land of the free and the home of the brave. And our church is supposed to reflect that and show that we are God's chosen country and that we are the harbingers of goodness and ethics and morals, and we are the saviors of the world. Well, there's nothing biblical about that. And if we were to claim to be a Christian nation, it might behoove us to actually act like one. But instead of the church being an example of how we live culturally, which is not necessarily what I'm proposing either, but what we have done is the church has adopted the culture. Instead of influencing the culture to have it be more loving, the culture has influenced our church to be more hateful. And as such, most of the atheists that I know in this world are very loving people. And the reason why they've given up on God, besides for scientific reasons and other questions they have, is because they've been hurt by the church. They've been abandoned by the church because they dared to question. They've been judged by the church because they are either gay or trans or not fitting in a gender label. They've been rejected by the church because of so many reasons, hateful reasons. And the even worse thing is the way that our church is divided by race and culture and and language. We could have a true beloved community, but a beloved community is not one where there's a white church and a black church and a Latinx church and a church that is open and affirming, because what happens then is we have all these different churches in silos. But when we're in silos, do we actually ever learn from each other? Of course not. Because the only way that we can learn from each other is by being present with each other in community. We have to have conversations. We have to get past our own views of what we think is right and wrong and the way we should live, the way we shouldn't live. I mean, yeah, there's basics like about choosing love over fear, choosing community over selfishness, choosing to support one another rather than tear each other down. There's definitely things that are common across all experiences, whether we choose love over fear. And I'm afraid to say that the church has joined with our culture in choosing fear. If it isn't fear of other, if it isn't fear of, oh, I don't know if we can have people of color in our church because then we might have to change our worship style. And I really like this 1800s music, and I really have to have the organ, and I really have to have a male head of my church because that's the way it's always been. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but Jesus didn't come to reinforce how it always has been. Jesus came to show us a new and better, inclusive way of being. Jesus hung out with prostitutes, tax collectors, people who served in the military, people who didn't. He called fishermen, he called women. There's so many people that Jesus called, and Jesus neglected no one. So when the church says, only this person can be a member of this congregation, if you believe this, then you are not acceptable. If you love this person, then you're not acceptable. If your skin is this shade or a darker shade, it may or may not be acceptable. If you don't have this certain hair color, if you weren't born in this country, I mean, all of these divisive things are not from God. They're absolutely human made. And Jesus came against empire, against power structures of oppression. Jesus came to bring freedom in grace and love. And the only way that that happens is when we practice it with each other. Jesus was the example, but we still have to live that way to bring the heaven to earth. The kingdom or realm, as I would say, on earth as it is in heaven. We have the power to do that. That is what Jesus came to show us. And the church has the most amazing opportunity to be the realm of God on earth. But the only way that we can do that is when we start accepting everyone. We are not allowed to judge people. That is God's job. It says so numerous times in the scripture. The church, I'm not even going to specify denominations because that is bringing a level of judgment in. But amongst our denominations, whether Catholic or Protestant, Methodist, Disciples of Christ, Presbyterian, Baptist, it doesn't matter. We are promoting hate and fear. We've adopted our culture and we have abandoned the gospel. And the gospel is the good news. But I'm not doing this video just to condemn the church. In fact, I'm not even condemning the church. What I'm doing is bringing attention to this issue so that the church can do better. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with individual churches who are concerned about their numbers dropping. And I'm currently serving in a church where the numbers are growing. And I can tell you that the reason why the numbers are growing is because we're open and affirming, because we're seeking justice for people in the world. We're willing to put our actions behind our words. We're willing to accept people, no matter what they look like, no matter how much money they have or don't have, because God created each of us in God's image. So what does a beloved community look like? That's a really good place to start. It's about welcoming and affirming all people. And that does not just mean letting people in the doors. It actually means going outside of our comfort zone. Yes, we should welcome everyone that comes into our church doors, but we should also be welcoming to anyone we encounter in the world, because the true church is the whole world, and all of God's children are all of the people in the world. So if we can just be accepting and honoring of the diversity of experience in one person, then we truly accept them. We don't need to put labels on people because really, who fits in one label? Who I am is a full child of God, made in God's own image, as we all are. And so we all have good and bad qualities, and we are all to be accepted. This doesn't mean we can't be called out if we do something hurtful. That's part of relationship building. And in fact, I think that we need to be more honest about where we're hurting and where we're getting it wrong. Because when we just walk around acting like everything is perfect and we've got it all figured out and, oh, I don't need any help and no, it's all good. I'm going to bootstrap up and deal with my emotional issues or my traumas or my experiences and I'm just going to set it aside. That's not what community is about. And I think so much of the church, that's where we get it wrong too, is that when we do invite people in, we invite them to leave their problems at the door. We invite them to bring their praise and their worship and their joy and hanging out with people and hearing a good sermon and having some coffee and snacks. But what about their pain? Perhaps they came to church because they needed someone to listen to their story. They needed to cry on someone's shoulder. They need to have a hug. But we need to create a safe space where people feel comfortable being vulnerable and honest about their actual experiences. We can't just have people put on a smiley face and be positive all the time because our experiences are not always positive. And I think that we build the deepest relationships when we're willing to be vulnerable and honest and real with each other. And that means even when we get on each other's nerves, because I've never had a conflict resolve without having the conflict come to a head first. You know, I could say, oh, such and such a person really pissed me off, and I'll just get over it. But if I never tell that person what they did to hurt me, then I'm going to kind of start to hold resentment about them. And they're never going to have known that they even hurt me in the first place. Possibly. I mean, sometimes you know. But if they didn't, I haven't been a real friend to them because I haven't let them know where they could do better or where I may have misinterpreted them. But all of that to say, we have to build relationships out of honesty, vulnerability, and realness. We can't just keep being positive all the time. We have to share the good and the bad, the joys and the suffering. It's all connected. And it's two sides of the same coin, human experience. And the best human experiences are when we share them and not be isolated. Loneliness and isolation and feeling not good enough is so prominent in our culture. And I think it's because we're so success oriented and productivity oriented. And that has invaded the church too. So many churches worry about how many people are in the pews. We need to grow our numbers. We need to have young children and families. We need to have this and we need to have that. And we need to do this and we need to do that. But a lot of those things are fear driven still. They're not about what we're doing as a body to bring the good news into the world. It's about how can we attract people to come to us. But that's not what it's about. It's about how we live in the world. And as we live in the world with love and compassion and acceptance and inclusion and community building and healing spaces and vulnerability, I don't think we ever have to worry about where our numbers are coming from because we're hungry for that type of connection. And the more that we provide spaces to build and grow those type of connections, the better church can be and the better the world can be. Because church, to me, is about our relationships with each other, and it does not require a building. I can have relationships with you over the internet. I can have relationships with you in a coffee shop. I can see you in line at the grocery store or any number of places. And everywhere we are in the world is an opportunity to build healthy community together and heal relationships. I think that as long as we're focused on our own misery and suffering and trying to compete and fit into a world that just does not make sense, a fear-driven world rather than a love-driven world, we're perpetuating the problems. And as Christians and as people who are just hungry for connection, for people who are just looking for spiritual healing and mental health healing and emotional healing, we have got to come together. All of the problems that we face in the world are solvable if we come together and use our diverse gifts, our diverse experiences and perspectives and amazing qualities, good, bad, in between, all of the things that make us unique and special, all of the things that we have in common, which actually are greater than the differences. When we come together and use the similarities and the differences for good and love rather than fear and division, the world can be a better place. So let's live in love and not fear and welcome and accept everyone. Stop judgment, start compassion, and let's do this thing.